My first week on Guimaras, I walked into a little motorbike shop in San Miguel to buy my own bike. Shoulders tight and wallet in hand, braced for the very same headache that buying anything used to be back in the States, and what happened instead caught a 67-year-old man completely off guard. Before I take you through that door, do me one quick favor. Leave a like and hit subscribe. It honestly makes my day, and it keeps these porch chats coming your way. Now, let me set the scene for you. It was hot. The kind of thick, wet heat that comes off the road at noon and wraps around you like a wool blanket. Inside the shop, rows of used bikes sat parked in the shade, close together, handlebars almost touching. Helmets hung from the ceiling on wire hooks, swaying a little. A floor fan rattled away in the corner, pushing the warm air around and not cooling a single thing. And there I stood, wallet in one hand, a whole list of worries in the other. Because here's the picture I walked in with. Back home in Ohio, buying a used bike meant one thing: a fight. A line out the door at the DMV, a clerk who'd never met a foreigner in his life and would find some reason to make you wait. The forms in triplicate, one for this, one for that, sign here, initial there, and then 2 weeks, maybe 3, sitting on your hands waiting for a plate to show up in the mail. If you've ever stood in a line like that, dreading an errand this simple, you already know the exact knot I carried into that shop. I'm Sawyer, by the way. I'm 67, and I've lived here in the Philippines 10 years now. You'd think after 10 years, a man would have stopped bracing for the worst. But old habits from back home die hard, folks. The tight shoulders come free with the passport. Here, let me hand you something useful before we go any further, because it took me a while to learn it myself. On a small island like Guimaras, a motorbike is not a toy. It's not a weekend thing. It is your whole daily life. It's how you get your groceries home. It's how you reach the pier before the ferry pulls out. It's how you get to the market while the good mangoes are still stacked. Out here, without a bike, you're stuck at home. And that's exactly why so many newcomers overpay they show up, not knowing what a decent used bike should actually run. And the price just gets away from them. Grab yourself a coffee before we get to that number, by the way. Because the number is the part you came for. And honestly, that's the whole reason I started writing things down for people. 10 years of watching good folks land here and stress over the simple stuff. The bike, the visa, the first month of costs, and overpay because nobody ever told them what normal looks like. So I put every one of those answers into a practical little ebook called The One-Way Guide, part of what we call the One-Way Club. It won't ride the bike for you, and it's not for the fella who'd rather figure it all out cold on the ground. But if you'd like a head start on the real prices and the real steps before you ever step off the plane, it's all in there. The link's in the description if you want it. All right, back in the shop. That's when Nilo came out from the back, the owner. A wiry man with grease worked deep under his fingernails and an easy, unhurried grin, wiping his hands on a rag that wasn't doing much good. And I'll be honest with you, I unloaded on the poor man. The whole nervous stack came out at once. What about the registration? Is there a surcharge for foreigners? How many forms do I fill out? How long's the wait? 2 weeks? 3? Do I need to come back with a stamp from some office over in the city? Now watch what Nilo does with all my worry. Because this is the exact moment it started to come undone. He just grinned. He let me finish every last question. And then he lifted one greasy hand and waved the whole pile of it away, soft, slow, like he was shooing a lazy fly off the counter on a warm afternoon. Like I'd asked him something a little silly. Like none of it was the mountain I'd built up in my head on the way over. And here's the thing. I didn't believe him. Not yet. 10 years in, and my shoulders were still up around my ears, waiting for the catch. Waiting for the part where the smile drops and the real trouble starts. That fan kept rattling in the corner. The smell of grilled fish drifted in from a carinderia across the road. And there was still one question hanging in that hot, still air, the only one that really mattered. Nilo had grinned and waved every dreaded form away like it was nothing. But I still hadn't heard the one number that would tell me whether any of this was actually within reach, what this bike was going to cost me. 55,000 pesos. That was the number Nilo finally said, still grinning, tapping the seat of that used red Honda 125 with a fingernail black from engine grease, about $980. And my shoulders came down an inch, right there in the heat of the shop. Let me open that up for you the way I read my own bank statement, line by line, because that number is the whole point. 55,000 pesos, $980 for a bike that starts first kick and runs my entire day. Back in Ohio, I made a car payment every single month, and this bike, the whole bike, mine to keep, cost less than one of those payments. 1. I sat with that for a second. Do the math with me right now. Under $1,000 for the thing that runs your whole day here, let that sit. Now, the part I'd been dreading for 2 weeks before I ever walked in. The paperwork. Back home, a purchase like this meant a line at the counter, a foreigner surcharge nobody warned you about, forms in triplicate, and then you wait. I had my folder ready. I'd practiced my patient face. Nilo just took the papers off the counter, licked his thumb, and started filling them out himself. The LTO registration, the island's motor vehicle office, the thing I was sure would eat my week. He handled it right there for around 1,600 pesos, about $28. No line, no surcharge for the American, no forms in triplicate. He'd done it 100 times, and it showed. Then there's what it costs to actually run the thing. A full tank on that Honda runs me roughly 250 pesos, about $4.50. And here's what $4.50 buys on Guimaras. Enough fuel to cross the whole small island twice and still have some sloshing in the tank. Picture your last full tank back home. This one crosses an entire island twice. While Nilo scratched away at the forms, I just stood there and let the place soak in. Across the road, a carinderia had fish going on the grill, and that smoke drifted right over. You could smell the char of it. Next to the shop, mango stalls stacked green and gold in the heat. The vendor fanning flies off the top row. A jeepney came rattling past, all chrome and painted saints, horn tapping twice for nobody in particular. This was the office I was doing business in. No fluorescent lights, no ticket number. Then Nilo's wife came over, aiming small, quick, a dish towel over one shoulder carrying 2 cold Cokes, the glass bottles already sweating. She pressed one into my hand before I could say a word. You sit, she said. Papers take time, the Coke does not. And she laughed and went back to the shade. Now, I told you I'd be straight with you, so here's the part that wasn't perfect. Because it wasn't all a postcard, and I'm not going to pretend it was. That Honda had a seat that sat too low for a tall man like me. My knees came up higher than I liked, and after an hour, my back let me know about it. The side mirrors were both cracked, spidered right across, near useless in the sun. Little things, but real. And the bigger one riding here took getting used to. You've got tricycles lumbering along, slow and wide, and you're threading past them on the left in traffic that has its own rhythm nobody wrote down. I'll be honest with you, it took me a genuinely nervous week before I trusted myself out there. White knuckles, slow and careful. 10 years in, and I still respect that road. But you fix the seat for a few hundred pesos. You swap the mirrors. And the nerves? Those pass. A week later, I was rolling through San Miguel like I'd done it my whole life. So, there I am. Cold Coke in my hand, fish smoke in the air, watching a man I'd met an hour ago fill out my government paperwork for the price of a lunch. And I'll tell you what I was feeling, because it was strange. It was almost too easy. Every single thing I'd braced for the line, the surcharge, the wait, the American tax on getting anything done, none of it had come. And when something you've dreaded for 2 weeks just quietly doesn't happen, part of your gut goes looking for the catch. There's got to be a catch. Nilo capped his pen and looked up. The registration, he said that part with the LTO, that'll take a couple of days to finalize. Come back later in the week. And there it was, the wait. I felt myself relax, almost relieved, because that made sense to me. That was the world I knew. You buy the thing, you leave a deposit, you come back when the paperwork clears, and they hand it over. That's how it works. That's how it always worked. So I started reaching for my excuse I'd swing back by Thursday, I said, already half turning toward the door, already bracing for the one small catch I was sure had to be coming. The deposit he'd want to hold, the fine print, something. And that's when he did the thing I did not expect. He reached over the counter and pressed the key straight into my palm. That same afternoon. No contract to sign, no deposit held back, no clipboard of forms in triplicate, just his hand closing my fingers around a warm little motorbike key, and that grin of his, grease still under his fingernails, like he'd done the most ordinary thing in the world. I stood there holding it. I'd been mid-sentence, fishing for my excuse to swing back later in the week, and now the bike was mine. Bring the rest of the balance next month, Nilo said, waving a hand at the whole idea of the money like it was a fly by the window. Not a worry in his voice, not a flicker of doubt about the American he'd known for exactly 1 hour. And then he said the thing I still carry with me. He looked at me plain, wiped his hand on a rag, and told me, "You live here now, you'll be around. You live here now, you'll be around." Read that back. A key in my hand that same afternoon from a man I'd met an hour before. That's the part I came here to tell you. That's the thing I did not expect. Not the price, not the paperwork, not any of the friction I'd braced my shoulders against walking through his door. It was the trust. He handed a stranger a running motorbike on a promise, on a handshake, and went back to fixing the flat he'd been working on before I ever came in. Let me tell you what that handshake would have looked like back home. Picture a shop in Ohio. Picture a fellow behind the counter looking at a foreigner who just landed. No local credit, no history, no address he could vouch for. That man doesn't press a key into your palm and tell you to settle up next month. He runs your name 3 ways. He wants the full amount cleared before the wheels leave the lot. And I don't blame him for it. That's just how it works there. But it's why I walked into Nilo's shop with my jaw set, waiting for the catch. The catch that, out here, simply never came. Here's the small, honest part, so you know I'm giving it to you straight. I still had to teach myself the road. The seat sat a touch too low for my legs, and one of the mirrors had a crack running through it. Riding on the correct side of a slow tricycle in traffic took me a nervous week to trust. Hands tight on the grips, going slower than the school kids on their bicycles. That's real. That's the friction. But friction is a thing you get over in a week. Trust like Nilo's is a thing you remember for 10 years. So I rode it home, out of San Miguel, onto the coast road, and it was right around 4 o'clock. The heat of the day had softened. The sea breeze came off the water on my left and pushed straight into my face, cool and salty and alive, and I could hear the little Honda engine humming under me, steady as anything. Mango country opened up on both sides of the road, those orchards Guimaras is famous for, rows and rows of them heavy in the sun. A truck stacked with green mangoes rolled the other way, and the driver lifted 2 fingers off the wheel at me, just like that, like I belonged on that road. Feel that sea breeze for a second, because this is what the number actually buys. Not the metal, not the 2 wheels. It buys a Tuesday afternoon where you're riding the coast road of your own island, the sea on one side and the mango trees on the other, and a stranger already treats you like a neighbor. I'd owned the place all of an afternoon, and I felt like I'd owned it for years. That's when it landed on me, somewhere along that road. It was never really about the bike. A man can buy a bike anywhere. What I'd actually been handed, over that greasy little counter, was a piece of how this whole country works. People here take you at your word and let the rest sort itself out. 10 years in, And that still catches me. It hasn't worn smooth. It hasn't gone ordinary. Every so often, somebody trusts me with something they've got no earthly reason to, and I feel that same warm surprise I felt with the key in my palm. Now, let me put the plain arithmetic back in your lap, the way I read my own bank statement. That used Honda 125 came to 55,000 pesos, under $1,000. Less than 1 month of the car payment I used to write out in Ohio. The registration Nilo handled with the transport office himself, and that ran about 1,600 pesos, call it $30, and I never stood in a single line. A full tank costs me somewhere near 250 pesos, about $4.50, and that's enough fuel to cross this whole small island twice over before I need more. Add it up, the bike, the paperwork, a tank of gas, under $1,000, 1,600 pesos of painless registration, a $4.50 fill, and one honest handshake. That's the receipt. That's the whole thing. So run your own figures now. Under $1,000. Ask yourself how far that catch is really out of reach. Look at what you've got coming in every month, whatever your check is, and set it next to that number. Not a fortune, not a gamble, the price of a used motorbike, and a little courage. That's what my first week in Guimaras cost me. Under $1,000 for a whole retirement suddenly on wheels, and a man named Nilo who never once looked at me like an outsider. The dread I flew in with, all that tight-shouldered DMV worry from the States, I left it at his shop door, and I never went back for it. It's doable, it's cheap, and it's a great deal closer than it looks from your kitchen table back home.